Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Adobe XD Masterclass. My name's Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and a big good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone joining me on this lovely Friday afternoon, or whenever it is that you are. Hope you're all doing well. I'm excited to be back for another masterclass. It's the third masterclass, and it's going to be delicious. We're going to dive into some donuts. I know Jack in the chat is excited. Hey, Sam and Haheen and Abdullah and Tim and Jack. And Sam is ready for a delicious landing page. I am too. So if you are joining me live, hey Ariana, let me know in the chat who you are, where you're tuning in from. Maybe if this is your first time using Adobe XD, I'd love to know that as well. And definitely shoot me some questions because we're going to be here for an hour. We're going to have a chill time. We're going to look at some donuts. We're all going to get hungry probably. And I'm happy to answer questions. And just a little bit of a hint, we're almost at the end of January. What day is it? January 24th. And the January update hasn't come out yet. There's only 6-7 days left. So it's close. It's close. Let me know in the chat what you're hoping to see in the mystical, magical, unknown January update. So definitely let me know. Hey, Eric, welcome. Thank you. Love the background. I wish I can take credit for this beautiful image behind me, but I grabbed it from Adobe stock. But it's great, isn't it? It's lovely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to... Let me just make sure everything is good. Everything looks good. I'm going to hop over to my screen. Where's my screen? I can't find my screen. All right, here we go. Boop. There we go. Oh, that's not my screen. Where does my screen go? Hold on. My screen disappeared. Do you see that? Because I don't see that. That's weird. Where's my screen? There's me, right? And there is not my screen. Hold on. Give me 1 second. It's never a live stream without some technical difficulties. Let me select my monitor. Here we go. And nope, yeah, Tim says, dark mode. Indeed. Where is my screen? This is weird. Do you know where my screen went? Let me add this again. Hold on. See, it just would not be the same without any technical difficulties. Video capture, screen capture, right? New screen capture. Oh, okay, we're almost there. Now I gotta select. Hold on, we've got this. We're getting there. We're getting there, and bam! I found my screen, but I don't see me now. Things are fun, aren't they? Here we go. We're good. There's me. Nope, I'm not there. I don't know. I'm around somewhere, right? I'm somewhere. I see me over here, but I don't see me over here. Hold on. This is fun. Do you see me? Let me know if you see me in the little window down at the bottom. Let me know if you see my screen. Things are happening. Things are weird. Let me go back to my face. And then we're still on hold. Yeah, we are on hold, aren't we? There we go. Okay, now I think we're good. All right. Tim says no. Well, I think I fixed it now. I do not see you. Okay, I think we're good now. Let me know. It's going to take a few seconds to update, but here we go. We're good. We have an hour to figure this out. So here is my Instagram account, and the reason I'm bringing this up, and this is not just a way to get me to follow you all to follow me on Instagram, although that would be nice. Does my Instagram picture count? No, it doesn't. But I posted this, and some of you, there's Jack in the in Instagram comments. I posted this not too long ago, and this is kind of what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be working on a landing page or whatever this might be that you want to call it for this lovely donut service or whatever it might be. We're going to create some cool stuff. We're going to talk about masks. We're going to talk about components. We're going to talk about laying things out. Yeah, there you are, Jack. So thank you, Tim. Honestly, I did not do this just to get some follows on Instagram, but this is where I post it. So we're going to hop over to Adobe XD. Now that everything is going well, here we go. Let's hop over to XD. Boop, there we go. This is the XD start screen, and we're literally going to be starting from scratch. And again, if you look, Mom, I'm on stream, and if you have any questions, again, definitely throw them in there. If you want to learn something specific, we do have an hour, just under an hour, and I'll try to touch on as much as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a web design. We'll start, let's say around, 1366 by 768. That's very specific, but of course, if you want a little bit larger, you can do 1920 by 1080. There's a lot of presets in Adobe XD that you can use, but I'm simply going to click on this and it's going to spring open our new document. And again, we're starting from scratch. So we've got our assets, we've got our layers, we've got all of our things, but we've got our lovely artboard here smack in the center of our document. What I might want to do just to kind of get things going is set a background color for this lovely, artboard. I can also name it. I'm going to name it Donuts. I'm going to try my best throughout the stream, since it's a masterclass, to keep everything nicely organized. We're going to group things. We are going to, what else are we going to do? We're going to name our components. That's always important, right? So we've got our artboard selected, and over here to the right, we can set a fill for that artboard. I can just click on fill just like this, and I can set a color. And let's go for a nice blue color. Maybe I'll add a little bit of green in there, and maybe I'll just desaturate it a touch. Just something like this. We don't want to go too crazy because we don't want it distracting from all the elements that are on our screen. So this is a pretty nice color, and I might want to use this in other areas throughout this design. So what I might want to do is add this to my assets. So if I go down here to the bottom of my interface, I can access my assets panel. You can also access it using the Command-Shift-Y shortcut. There we go. And here's our assets. It's kind of boring right now. There's not much in there. But if I press the plus button beside colors, it's simply going to grab that color and add it to my assets panel. I can double click on it, and I'll just name this, what kind of color is this? Just a teal blue? Someone in the chat give me a fancy, fun name for this blue. Right now I'm gonna name it teal blue, but I'm sure one of you will come up with something cool. So we've got our background. Now maybe down at the bottom, we may want, because this landing page may be extending a little bit, we may want a little bit of a white area so that users know that they can scroll down and see additional information. I'm going to grab the rectangle and I'm going to drag one out just like this. Beautiful. And maybe I want a little bit of a, oh, Tim says Ocean Dreams. Kara says Tiffany Blue, Blueberry Donut. Oh, I like all of those, but maybe since we're kind of going on the theme of donuts, I'm going to go for Blueberry Donut. That's a good suggestion, Jack. So every color from now on has to be something to do with donuts. So I've got this white box down at the bottom. I may want it slightly slanted, and there's many ways to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on it, and I'm simply going to just grab one of these corners and just move it down a touch, right? Just like that. I'm going to turn off the border. And of course, if we do decide to add additional stuff and elements and content down below with an extended artboard, we can just, grab this, we can double click on here, grab these corners, move them down, whatever we want. We can do a lot of cool stuff with that. But maybe if we have time towards the end, we'll get to that. But we want to focus on the good and delicious stuff. I'm just noticing, you probably can't see it, but there's like a little hair on the lens of my camera. You probably can't see it, but it's there. I see it. It's going to bother me. Anyways, so we've got our landing page and our artboard sort of set up. Now we need an image, right? So I'm going to grab my rectangle from the tools panel on the left and simply draw one out. And I'll just draw one out across this artboard. We want a nice large image just like this. And I might want the corners rounded a little bit. So you're noticing I've got these little handles. If you're brand new to XD, got these little handles and dots, whatever you want to call them, on the inside of rectangles, and also you have a handle on the inside of a polygon. You can just grab it, pull it inwards a little bit, and you'll be able to round out the corners on all sides. And of course, in the properties inspector, you can set a specific value, let's say 24, or if you want more control on all the corners, you can press on this, and you can set different radius amounts for each corner. Super cool, but I'll keep it at 24 right now. Now, of course, we got this boring white box, right? We need a delicious image. So I'm gonna hop over to Finder, and I've got some great images I grabbed from Unsplash of a lot of different donuts. These just are gonna make me and all of you incredibly hungry, and we may use some of them throughout this project. We may just use one, who knows? We'll see how much time we have. But I do have this one right here. It's a great image. This was by Adriana, possibly. I'm terrible with names. You've probably all seen this. So what I'm going to do is simply going to grab this image, drag it directly into Adobe XD, and you can use any shape as a mask, and it'll highlight in blue, pop it in there, boop, and there we have a really nice looking image. And I can make sure it's centered on my document just like that, and things are looking pretty good, right? And if anyone is just joining, Eric says, I'm very hungry and trying to lose weight. I'm sorry, Eric. Again, if anyone is joining me, if you do have questions throughout this stream, we do have an hour, and throw them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer. So we've got the image. Now, of course, we need some content over top of the image to kind of explain what this donut is. So what I might want to do is grab my rectangle and just drag out a content area just like this. That's going to pop it right about here. I'll make sure to center it, right? And again, I'm going to round out the corners just a little bit, but maybe just to get a little bit fancy. Let's leave this around 32 pixels. To get a little bit fancy, I may want to really round out the corner over to the right, the top right corner. So I'll just hold down Alt or Option and drag this inward so I have a nice corner looking like that, looking fancy. 130 pixels, it's a pretty big number, but it looks pretty good, right? Probably don't need a border, so I'm going to turn that off. But you know, we're all about getting fancy today, right? It's going to be a very modern landing page. So what we might want to do is really start to explore how a background blur could look on something like this. And if you know me, you probably know I love background blurs, but it has to be done right. Because if you were just add a background blur, which you can do right down here, just like that, that's probably a little bit too much. There's a lot going on there. The color difference is pretty drastic, and when you start adding content, especially text, it's going to be very difficult to work with that content and not have it clash with the background. So what I like to do is, you know, I can increase the amount of blur. I can make it very unblurry down here, or I can make it very blurry, but I'm going to drop it just a little bit. And then you can control the brightness. So you can make it really bright, so it's nice and white. You can make it nice and dark if you wanted to. You can also control the transparency. So if you drag this up, it's going to basically take the fill color that you're using. It's going to bring some of that back. So now we have a very subtle blur. It's there if you're looking for it, but it's also not there. So it'll allow you to really add some content. Again, text and images and rectangles, because we all add rectangles, right? And you know, it's just very elegant, right? Not too much. So I'll leave it somewhere right around there. If you are following along, 32 pixels for the blur, 15 for the brightness, and 70% for the transparency. That looks pretty good right about there. All right. So now on the inside, we may want some content as well. Maybe right at the top, we want a little bit of a border just because, right? So I'm going to grab my line tool and simply draw one out just like this. And I may want, you know, this border to be the same blue color that I'm using in the background. You can do this in two different ways. You can either press the eyedropper tool and then click on the background color, or if you do have that asset saved, you can right click and then apply as border just like that. Perfect. Let me zoom in here so we can see what we're working with, right? So we've got our line there, but it's a boring straight line. What I might want to do is increase the size a little bit. I'll just bump that up. Maybe I'll round out the caps so they're nice and round on each end, like that. But since we're talking about donuts and sprinkles and things like that, I may want to introduce a little bit of a dash. So I'm just using my arrow key to go up like that, right? I can also adjust the gap if I wanted to make them a little bit further apart. And now we have this really cool looking line. And if we do decide to make it a little bit longer, we just have little sprinkles that kind of pop out, right? Which is kind of fun. All right, so we've got this line going at the top of our box. Now, I'm catching myself. I got to make sure. I'm going to name this container, not all in caps. I'm not screaming at Adobe XD. Container, and maybe I'll just type, name this sprinkle line. Perfect. And this could be image, and this will be separator. Separator. Something like that. Spelling is hard. Hey, Tulsi, welcome. All right, so we've got our line, we've got our container. Now we need some text. So I'm going to grab my text tool and I'm going to type out, let's say, Adobe, well, let's go for the Adobe donut, just like that. Now, obviously, this is kind of boring. Now, if you're just mocking things up, this might work just fine. But right now it's just not looking great, especially with the aesthetic and the modernism that we're going for this landing page. So I might want to style this text a touch. So I'm going to grab, let's say, Rift, I believe, is a pretty good font. That's not bad. We can go with that. There's also Rift Soft, and I did grab this from Adobe Fonts, fonts.adobe.com. I want to make this a little bit larger. And maybe we'll go for a nice bold color. There we go. Perfect. Now, you can also adjust the colors a little bit. So maybe over here, we might want to select the Adobe, right? And turn this into a nice pink color. Ooh, that looks pretty good, right? Kara's saying pop-ins. I think for once, I am not going to use pop-ins throughout this stream. I'm having withdrawals already, but I'm not going to do it. Make this maybe a little bit larger. You can just grab this lovely little handle at the bottom and just pull this up a touch. Yeah, there we go. I can also adjust the line spacing. Maybe just drop that just a little bit. And there we go. So we've got our text going on. Things are looking pretty good. If we do want to make sure everything lines up really nicely as we're designing this, we can grab our rulers from the left or the top and just drag one out just like that. That looks pretty good. We can also drag one at the top if we wanted to. Beautiful. All right. So things are looking pretty good. Things are getting there. Maybe I'll just, I'm going to tweak this color a little bit because we do have a little bit of time. Maybe I'll just suck out some of the saturation from that. There we go. Now I may want to add both of these colors to my assets panel. So again, we can use them throughout this project. So I'm going to hop over to my assets panel, Command Shift Y, and simply press the plus button beside color. It's going to grab all the colors that are part of this text. Jesse says, what? No Mary Poppins? Nope, not today. So now that I have these colors, I need some color names. Again, we're going with donut themed. So let me know what we should name the pink and what we should name this darker color. It's going to be difficult to name this one. This one's probably pretty simple, but leave that in make donut larger. I could make donut a little bit larger. I could just kind of pop this up like that and then adjust the line spacing. Ooh, okay. I can deal with that. I can go with that, Abram. Good suggestion. Not too bad. All right. So we've got some text. We've got our line going on. Maybe over to the right, we may want to indicate how many calories this donut has. So maybe I'll just grab my text tool and let's go for 127 calories. It's not a lot of calories. It's probably a lot more than that, but we're going to go with this and go with 127. Now, I'm kind of looking at this, and Rift is a great font, but when it comes to the Rift font, all the letters are capitalized. They're all uppercase. So in that case, I'm actually going to switch the fonts. Sometimes it's okay to kind of mix and match fonts if they're close enough in nature. And I'm going to go with Sophia Soft, Sophia Pro Soft, which is very similar to the softness and the roundness of the Rift typeface, but you can have lowercase letters. So I'm going to just drop this a little bit. Maybe bold is not the right way to go. Maybe regular, possibly. And we probably don't want too much attention going towards the calories, so I'm just going to drop the color just a touch, just like that. That looks pretty good. Make sure everything's, I can bring out my guides again, make sure everything lines up really nicely, and it does. So we got strawberry jelly. Yeah, so I think strawberry is probably a good idea for the name for the pink. I don't really know about this one. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. But we've got our calories down here. Now, down below, we might want some additional information. We want maybe a description of what this donut is. So I'm going to grab my text tool, and instead of simply clicking, which will give me point text, I may want to click and drag to create area text, right? And my smart guides are helping me out throughout this process to make sure everything lines up really nicely. And now I've got my point text, and I can start typing. So I do have my text over here that I'm just gonna copy it, but if anyone has suggestions on what the description should be for this specific donut, throw it in the chat again. But I'm gonna type out, not only is the Adobe Donut XD pink, but it also tastes like a repeat grid. Delicious. There we go. And of course, just like we did with our point text, we can make some changes. So I can bring up the line spacing a little bit. Maybe I can make this a little bit larger. just like that. And if I wanted to, maybe I can highlight XD pink, just like that, by just clicking on the strawberry color over to the left within the assets panel. Maybe I'll also grab the comma. Hey, Michael, welcome. Thanks for joining me. And there we go. We've got our description of our lovely Adobe donut. It's XD pink, and it also tastes like a repeat grid. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but repeat grids are great, so we're gonna run with that. It's a good thing. All right, so how are things looking? Things are looking pretty good. Let's zoom out a little bit, turn off our guides. All right, things are looking pretty good. So we've got our text, we've got the Adobe donut, we've got the description, we've got our calories over to the right, we've got our lovely line at the top. We may need some other information. Of course, we may need a button that will allow us to actually buy this donut or add it to our cart or something like that. So I'm gonna grab my rectangle and let me show my guides again. Beautiful. You can just drag out a rectangle across this container. That looks pretty good. This is fun, thank you. It is kind of fun, especially when you're talking about donuts. So I've got this rectangle towards the bottom that I'm gonna use for my button. I'm gonna click on the strawberry color to use this as the main color for this button. And of course, a little bit later on, we're gonna get into components and states and things like that. So to really make sure that we can reuse some of these elements. Now, for the corners on this button, because everything else is kind of rounded, we do probably wanna keep consistency with that. Now we could go ahead and round it out completely, which doesn't look too bad, but at the same time, it's a little bit much. So maybe I'll just round it out just a little bit. Maybe let's see what 16 pixels looks like. That might be a little bit too much, maybe 8 pixels. That's not too bad. Let me know what you think of that. If that's too much or too little, I'm not too sure. I can also center it in the middle of my document, just like that. Not the document, but the actual container. And our button's looking pretty good. Antonio says you might want to add the price as well. I will be adding the price. We're actually going to be adding it on the button, but we could also experiment with a few other places that we can add it depending on how many donuts someone adds to their cart. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my text tool and let's go ahead and type out buy now. And this will be, let's say, $2.60. That's probably an expensive donut, but I'm gonna run with it. Dave is saying, any suggestions for learning sizes and contrast? I mean, font sizes, button sizes, contrast. So there are many places on the web. There's also some style guides if you're designing for iOS or macOS or Google, Android, or whatever it might be. Usually within their documentation, they have some pretty good style guides on how, large fonts should be. But there's a lot of different resources on the web. And some of it is just, trial and error, seeing what works well with others. I'm probably not totally happy with, the contrast and the size of some of these, text layers, but, you got to run with it sometimes. So we've got, and Tim or anyone else, if you do have links at your disposal, definitely throw them in there, because I know there are a lot of links that are kind of floating around. Peter Del Tondo, I don't think he's in the chat, but he usually throws out some pretty good links on contrast. And if you're talking about like accessibility contrast, actually, if I hop into my plugins for a second, the Stark plugin is fantastic. This is by far one of the best plugins, and if you want to make sure that your designs are very accessible and text is legible, definitely install this plugin, and it'll allow you to really, pick apart your design to make sure it passes all sorts of guidelines. So definitely grab that. So I've got my text here. There you go, Tim, thank you. And I may want to go back to Rift for this specific button, Rift Soft. We'll go for a nice white, and maybe let's go for bold. Yeah, there we go. Make it a little bit larger by pulling on that handle. Make sure it's centered. And this will definitely pass accessibility because we've got nice bright white text on a pink, somewhat dark background, which is looking pretty good. We've got our buy now call to action. We also have our dollar amount, $2.60. Again, I do think it's a little bit of an expensive donut, but we'll run with it. So we've got now our button pretty much looking pretty good. We may also want, just to kind of have a little bit of fun with this, a little bit of a shadow. Now, if I do go ahead and add a shadow down here at the bottom, that's not a great looking shadow, right? And shadows are incredibly difficult to work with. You got to be very careful, because if you add a shadow that looks like this is just bad. Just not great, right? So what I'm going to do for this, I'm actually going to not add a shadow in the traditional sense. What I might want to do is sample this color here and just make it maybe a little bit, let's say a little bit lighter maybe, and then just drop the boldness down to 0. And now we've got just a little bit of a, it's almost like a bevel, a little bit. You can take a look down here. It just adds a little bit of a playful nature to this button. It doesn't really help pop it out from the background because we've kind of taken care of that with the pink button on the white background. It just adds a little bit of a playful nature. And what's nice is if you do decide to get really fancy with this, let me go ahead and make sure to convert this into a component. And we're going to talk a little bit about components. And if you missed my masterclass, the first one and the second one, I dive really deep into components. But I'm going to go ahead and add a component up here, just like that. Boop. Oh, look at this. Oh, fun fact, I designed this. This was fun to do. Back when we introduced components, I believe in May of last year. Little fun fact. So what you can do now is you can kind of just hang this off the edge, and that will allow that little border that we just added will kind of allow it to pop from the background just a little bit. And again, it does add a little bit of a fun, playful nature to this design. So just like that, I'm gonna make sure to hop into my assets panel and just name this button. Bam, perfect. All right, so we've got our button looking pretty good. We've got the price. We may want a few other things. We may want some way to add additional items to our cart. So maybe you want more than one donut, because who just buys one donut, right? So maybe in here somewhere, we may want to add, a number counter of some sort. So maybe I'll grab my ellipse tool. Let me show my guide so I can make sure everything lines up really nicely. Drag out this just like that. And maybe this can be for the minus. So you want to remove donuts from your cart. So I'm going to add, let's go for a somewhat of a dark, or a little bit of a gray with a slight border. Now I'm just, looking at this now, this may not pass accessibility. So, you got to be careful with things like this. When you're talking about gray shapes on a white background, we're going to run with it for now, but we can always run it through the Stark plugin later just to see how things are looking. But, we're going to run with this. So we've got that here, and I may want to add like a minus sign. So I'm going to just grab my text tool just like that. It looks fancy. You can always use your text, right? And I might want to set a color just like that. Maybe I'll just make this a little bit longer. There we go. Beautiful. And, bold is looking okay. Medium, I don't know. What do you think? Bold or medium? Maybe I'll stick with bold for now. And of course, you could always do this with the line tool. If you don't want that extra, text space, you could grab a line, draw one out like that. Make it a little bit larger, round out the caps, and now you have a minus sign. Pretty simple, right? Pop this in the middle, make sure that everything lines up, bam. All right, now since you probably can't go lower than one donut unless you remove it, we may add a remove button at some point. We'll just grab this, the opacity, drag it down just a little bit. Hey Joe, welcome, just getting back from the office. Awesome, thanks for joining me. And I'll just drag it down like that. Beautiful. All right, so now we have the ability to remove donuts. We also need the ability to add donuts. So I'm gonna just grab these two layers, holding down my shift key to select both of them, and just duplicate this across like that. And this is gonna be the button that we're gonna use to add additional donuts. And we may want to pop this up back to 100%. We're gonna duplicate this one, and we maybe just wanna rotate it. So up here, you can just rotate 90 degrees, and now we have a lovely plus icon. And if I hop back into my layers panel, just to keep things nice and organized, we're gonna group it and just name this plus. We're gonna name this one minus or subtract, whatever you wanna call it. There we go. Tim says, yeah, I'd like to order -1 donuts. That sounds like a skit, what's the guy's name? That comedian. Well, this is fun. I don't remember his name. But he does jokes like that. Just group this will be add, and this will be Mitch Hedberg. That's his name. Subtract. Beautiful. All right, so we've got our add button, we've got our subtract button. Of course, we need a number in the middle, and we're gonna get a little bit fancy with this. We are going to create a number counter that animates. So we're gonna add the number 1. Now, we probably don't wanna go with Rift for this one because that one just looks a bit weird. Looks like a broken eye or something like that. So we're gonna go back to Sophia Pro. Sophia Pro Soft, that looks a lot better. Medium looks pretty good in that case. Now, of course, because we do want to create a number counter, we do want to get a bit fancy. And before I get, ooh, look at that, that actually lines up perfectly. But what I was going to say is if we don't have everything lined up perfectly, you want to make sure that the one is kind of in the center of both of these objects. What you can do is you can select the object at the far left, select the object at the far right, and the object in the middle. And then at the top of your interface, you can press this little guy right here, which is going to distribute all the objects horizontally based on the one at the far left and the one at the far right. And it'll just make sure that one is nicely in the center. Gal is saying, how about XD doesn't support right to left languages yet? Yeah, so definitely go to adobeXD.uservoice.com and make sure to upvote that. A lot of features that are being developed for XD are really determined by demand. So if more people upvote that request, it's not an easy thing to do, so it's not something that can be done in like a week or two. So definitely upvote that request, and if there's enough demand for it, the team will definitely get to it. So we've got this, we've got the number one, we've got our minus button, we've got our add button. But again, we might want to add some sort of an animated number counter to this once we get into components and states. So instead of just one, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll stop it at 5, right? Of course, we don't want all of this being displayed immediately. So what we need to do is add a mask so that only the one is displayed and the other numbers are not. So what I'm going to do, and maybe some of you have seen me do this a few times in the past, I'm going to grab my rectangle and simply draw out a rectangle over top of the number one. If I just drop the opacity a little bit, you can kind of see what's going on back there. And we're going to use this rectangle as a mask to hide all the other numbers. So in the layers panel or on your canvas, you can make sure to select the rectangle, which I'm going to name mask. And I'm also going to select the layer, the text layer with all the numbers. So I've got both of those selected. I'm going to go to Object menu at the top and Mask with Shape. If you are on Windows, which does not have a menu bar at the top, you can right-click on the shapes on your canvas, and I believe there's an Object Mask with Shape option. Or you can use the shortcut key. And there we go. So now we only have the number one visible, but inside of that mask, you do have all the other numbers. That looks pretty good. All right, so we've got that going on. And now that we have all of the elements that are part of this this interaction that we're eventually going to created, what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of them, subtract, add, and the mask group, which let me go ahead and name number counter. And we want to make sure to select all of these and turn all of these into a single component. So I've got all the layers selected over here to the left. I'm going to press the plus button beside component. There we go. There's our default state. Everything looking good. I can make sure to name this number counter. And in just a few minutes, I can't spell number counter. And in just a few minutes, yeah, Joe says Control-Shift-M will also mask it as well. And in just a few minutes, we will get to animating this thing and creating a few different states. But for now, let's add a few more things, right? Maybe below, we may want to add some possible tags about what this donut is. I don't know why not, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab my rectangle and I'm going to draw one out just like this. And for this one, I may want to use the blueberry donut color that we created earlier, just like that. I'll round at the corners, let's say 4 pixels. That doesn't look too bad. And then maybe this will just be the donut tag or donuts tag. Make that a little bit smaller, just like that. I'll set the fill to white. Looks pretty good. There we go. Make sure it's centered in the middle. Nudge this around a little bit, or I can select both of these and just make sure everything's centered. Yeah, I gotta move it up a little bit. There we go. All right. Yeah, definitely, as Gal, she just posted, he or she, I can't see. Definitely go there if you want right to left text support. Throw it in there. I know the team is aware that there is some demand for it, but compared to some of the other features that they're working on that are higher on the list, I really hope they do get to it soon. But yeah, definitely go upvote that. So we've got one tag here. I may want to turn this into a component so we can very easily reuse this and also adjust the styling of all of them at once. So I'm going to create one more component. It's going to call this tags. And now I can start creating additional ones. So this might be, let's say, sprinkles. Sprinkles. There we go. And what's another maybe Adobe, possibly. There we go. Now we have a few different tags for these donuts. And if you're brand new to Sheet, perfect, good to know. So if you're brand new to Adobe XD and you're not really sure how components work, again, watch my previous masterclasses or go to letsxd.com/states and you can learn all about that stuff. But what's cool about components is you can dive in and you can adjust the styling of one component, the master component, and it kind of propagates to all the other ones. So if I want to change the color to this pink, you can easily do that, and as long as you haven't overridden that specific property on the instances, it just works. It's really cool. So things are looking pretty good. Let me hide my guides and let me know in the chat what you think we also need to add to something like this, right? We've got our image in the background. We might need a navigation bar at the top to browse additional donuts and things like that. We've got our container over here to the right. It says the Adobe donut. It's got a little bit of a description. We can probably adjust some of the spacing a little bit to make sure everything is looking pretty good. We've got our number counter, which we're going to animate shortly. We've got our tags, and we've got our Buy Now button. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hop back over to my layers panel. Just make sure to group all these things so everything looks pretty good. The container, I can group all of this stuff if I wanted to. Donut info, or you can just name it Adobe Donut. Right? So now I've got all this stuff inside of a single group. All right, so now let's get a little bit fancy with some of our components and states. Let's start off really simple. And maybe for this guy over here, we may want some sort of an icon. So I'm going to hop over to my plugins panel, which is right down here at the very bottom. Tim says a shopping cart icon, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing right now. So I've got this icons for design plugin. You can use you can use your third-party icons that you might have in an icon manager. I use Nucleo quite a bit, but let's just look up cart, and there's a lot of different cart icons. Let's see which one looks pretty good. I'm going to dive into this donut. There's a lot of different options. iOS, there is cart. Oh, Joe says total cost. That's a good idea. So maybe this down here could be the total cost, and then we got to add the cost per donut somewhere. Well, this is an interesting, look at this one. This is fancy. It kind of fits with the aesthetic that we're going for, this modern, curvy look. Tim says it could also be a shopping basket. It could be. But I'm really digging this, whatever this thing is, this fancy looking icon. I'm gonna move this over a touch. There we go. Maybe I'll make the button a little bit larger. The component does adjust really nicely. I'll grab these two and move it in the center. There we go. All right. So we've got our lovely button looking good. And Dave says, which plugin is that? That is the Icons for Design plugin. And it shows you, as you're searching, shows you all the different open source icons. iOS, Material, Feather, Metro, which I didn't know about, but it has this really cool cart icon, which is nice. Nanon sends a box. They don't give you the donuts in a shopping cart. That's a very good point. But maybe this place does give you a donuts in a shopping cart. All right, so we've got this button looking pretty good, but we may want additional states for this button. We may want a hover state because this is a web-based project, and hover works great on the web. So I'm going to press the plus button right at the top to add a state, and we have the option of adding a new state or a hover state. I'm going to add a hover state. I can just name this hover state. It's a pretty good name. And what's cool is, let me actually backtrack just in case you haven't used states before. If you notice to the right of hover state, there's a little lightning icon, and that will let you know that when a hover state is created, it automatically wires it up in the background. So you don't have to go into prototype mode and do the thing. It just does it. So press hover state, name it, and now with that active, any changes I make to this specific button, it applies it to the hover state. So I'm going to dive in here, and maybe I'll just have this button get a little bit brighter, just like that. And maybe just to have a little bit of fun, we'll grab this icon here, and just maybe we'll just rotate it a touch. Oops. We'll just rotate it just a little bit, not a lot. We don't want to go too crazy with it. There we go. Hey, Idris, you're way halfway through. And if you do want to watch this later after this stream, it'll be uploaded to Behance and YouTube, and you'll be able to rewatch it. So there we go. So we've got our hover state created. We've got our default state and our hover state, and just like I mentioned, if you do press the plus button, it's not the plus button, the play button at the top, and you have, whoops, I have the wrong state selected. And there we go. And I'm just noticing it's not centered. Let me just go ahead and center my button. That looks much better. And we have a very subtle hover effect going on. Maybe the color change is a little bit too much, so I'm gonna bring that back just a touch, just like that. And now we have our lovely hover with that really interesting looking cart doing its thing, right? Fancy. Now, what if we wanted to really get fancy and then combine that with a tap trigger so that when you actually tap on that, something happens to all the things that are in here, right? So maybe for the default state, and we're gonna get a little bit fancy with this, we're gonna dive in here, we're going to duplicate this rectangle, and we're gonna use this as a mask. So I'm gonna move it to the top of my layer stack, I'm gonna select all of this, and again, just like we did with the mask previously, we're gonna mask with shape. Let me just make sure everything propagates really nicely to the other ones, and it looks like it did. So I'm editing my master component, it grabbed my mask, and it pushed it to the other states. And now what we can do, let me actually just name this. I don't know what to name it, button mask. It's not very interesting, is it? There we go. So we've got button mask, and in our hover state, we also have our button mask, right? So Tim says, so are you adding the donut to the cart or are you buying it right away? You know, Tim, that's a very good question. I don't know. Of course, you know, who knows? Maybe the cart could be for buy now, maybe it could be for add to cart. I don't know. We're gonna run with it. We're gonna see what happens. But we've got our two states. We've got our default state, we've got our hover state. But now maybe when someone taps on buy now, for whatever reason, just because we're getting fancy, the cart kind of rolls away. Again, I don't know why we're doing this, but we're gonna have some fun. So I'm gonna add one more state, and this will be the tap state. And we're going to, let's grab the text within this mask. Let's move it over to the side. And let's move, well, maybe we'll turn this a little bit so it's kind of rolling away, just like that, right? Again, I don't know why you're doing this. It's probably a little bit too much, but we're gonna run with it. And then maybe we just want another text layer. What do we want to type? Enjoy. Why not, right? Just like that. Beautiful. So now that we've got our hover state, we've got our default state, and we've got our enjoy state. So now how do we actually, sprinkles. Ooh, we should add some sprinkles in the button. We should. So how do we actually wire this up? So unlike the hover states, the button states or the tap states don't automatically wire up in the background. So we're gonna hop into prototype mode. Tim says, I can already see some devs rolling their eyes. I know, it's probably not very developer friendly. It can totally be done though. It's just not, you know, it's not ideal. But we're having fun, right? We're having fun with some donuts. So we can either do this from the default state or the hover state. Let's go ahead and hop to the hover state. And basically what we want is when someone taps on this button from the hover state, we're gonna just simply click on the prototype wire, and we're going to make sure to choose our tap state, just like that. Michael says, shouldn't say enjoy, it should say boop. Yeah, it probably should, shouldn't it? And we're gonna choose auto animate because we do want that cart to kind of roll off. And we'll do ease in and out, and let's say 0.4 seconds, so it's not too slow. So now we can hover, and then we can tap, and it does that little cool thing. Again, it's probably not ideal, but it is fun to do, right? Let's play that one more time. Woo! There we go. Fancy, right? Who knows? But we're running with it. All right, so now that we've kind of explored a little bit of components and states, let's also do the same thing with our lovely number counter here at the top. So we already have one component created, but we need to create some additional states for adding additional donuts. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new state, and this will be number 2. And now with that selected, all I have to do is just dive in and make some changes. So I'm gonna, because we can subtract a donut from having 2, we're gonna pop this up to 100%. We're gonna dive in here to our number mask and just move 2. There we go. And now we can add another state. This will be 3. Dive in here, grab our numbers, and this will be 3. We're gonna do one more or 2 more. This will be number 4. There's number 4. That looks pretty good. And we're going to do one more. This will be number 5. Whoop. there we go. That looks good. All right, so we've got our default state. Oh, I should probably, maybe 5 is probably the maximum number of donuts you can add. It's very rude, but we're gonna run with it. And we'll just drop this down to about 30%, which I think is what we did on the default state. I could be wrong. Yep, that looks pretty good. All right, so we've got our lovely number counter going on, but of course we need to wire this one up. So over in prototype mode, from the number 1, we're gonna grab the plus button. We're gonna click on the little handle to sprout out the prototype wire. And we're going to choose our default state of number 2. Ease in and out, 0.4 seconds, looks pretty good. Now we're gonna hop over to 2. We're gonna do the same thing for this one, choose number 3. And on this one over here, we're gonna make sure to choose the default state. And we're just gonna continue that process. So from 3, we're gonna go to 4, and also to number 2, just like that. Go to 4, and we're gonna go to 5, and then 3, and then finally we're gonna go to state number 5. That one we can't really do much, and we're going to go from this one all the way to number 4. Perfect. All right, so that is all wired up. Things looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and play this and see what it looks like. So we've got our buy now button at the bottom, again with that really fancy, probably over the top hover effect, and yeah, there we go. Michael says, Howard doesn't roll by standards like half a dozen. Yeah, you're probably right. We probably should do like a baker's dozen or a dozen or something like that. But you know what? We're breaking boundaries, right? We also have our components there, our number counter. There's number 2, 3, 4, and go back. 4, 5, and things are looking pretty fancy, right? Good. Things are looking good. And the best part of all of this is because we're using components and states, all of this is done on a single artboard. Previously, before states were introduced, you'd have had to have several different artboards for every single version of this number counter. But now that we have states, it can all be done on a single artboard. So what else can we do for this donut landing page? Well, maybe we'll grab this artboard and we'll extend it down a little bit to add some additional information. And just like I mentioned earlier, you can grab these little guys, drag them down. So we have some room down here. Maybe down here we might want some additional donuts that are being displayed. So I'm gonna grab my, and while I'm doing this, let me know in the chat, give me some ideas for donut names. But I'm gonna grab my rectangle, draw one out, and I should probably point out that you're probably noticing this little blue handle. If you don't know what that is, that's essentially the viewport height. So when you extend an artboard, it automatically gets added, and anything above this viewport height will be visible immediately, and anything below it will be visible when you start scrolling. I agree, Michael. States are great. So maybe I'll round this out just a touch, just like this. Don't want to go too much. 8 pixels looks pretty good. I do want it a little bit above that viewport height so someone knows if they are landing on this page that they can scroll down to see additional information. And maybe I might want to, turn off the border, set the color to a gray just for now. We're going to add some images in a second and turn this into a repeat grid. And you can do that with the Command and Control R shortcut. Yeah, Joe says total cost, Howard, else your 260 price is invalid. Yeah, so what you could do essentially is you could add the number counter to the button component or add them into one component. And then you can actually have the $2.60 change based on this component. So it's a little bit more complicated. Maybe we'll touch on that in the next masterclass, but you can definitely do that. So I've got the, the image here. I'm turned into a repeat grid. That's what I was going to do. So either Command and Control R, or you can press the repeat grid button at the top of your interface. Boop. And you have to boop when you say it, when you press it. There we go. Oh, and Kiki says the boop donut. Of course, you got to have a boop donut. And I might want to drag a few additional donuts across my artboard, just like that. Well, they're not donuts yet, but they will be. Perfect. So now I've got this repeat grid going on. What I can do is I can hop over to Finder, and I'm going to grab a few donuts. That one looks pretty good. That looks delicious. That looks nice. And we'll go for that one as well. That might be too many, but whatever. We're going to drag that in there. Just drag all of them directly into your repeat grid. Kara says Photoshop donut, Illustrator donut, etc. That could be interesting. I want it, that'll be a challenge for today. I want someone to design Photoshop donuts, Illustrator donuts, After Effects donuts, and tweet it at me. I want to check that out. So we've got all of our lovely donuts here inside of this repeat grid. We of course could create some maybe more hover effects so that when someone does hover over top of these, it displays what that donut is. So you may have seen me do this in the past. I do have a video on this, but when you're working with a repeat grid, which I'm going to name donuts, when you're working with a repeat grid, you want to be careful. You don't want to turn the image into a component, because then that'll disable you from dragging in bulk images into a repeat grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this. This will just be called overlay, and I'm going to drop this down to black. Maybe let's get a bit fancy, add a bit of a background blur, just a little bit like that. Do I want to go dark? No, that looks pretty good there. Beautiful. And then we want the name of the donut. So in this case, this is going to be, I did see some interesting, this made me hungry right now. Yes, it did, didn't it? Oh yeah, we got to go for the boop donut. That's a boop donut. Just like that, make sure to center it. Now you're noticing it's updating on all of them, but with text, you can go through and manually override those if you need to. Just like that. That looks pretty good. Well, it doesn't look great. Let me actually change this to Rift Soft. And I may want to, you know what? Let's go ahead and drop, maybe we'll brighten this up a lot. I don't know. I'm not feeling this. I am not, maybe we'll just do this. We'll ignore that background blur. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab both of these and turn them into a component. There we go. So now we can dive in and let me see. So we got cinnamon twist. Oops. So in this one, we got cinnamon twist. I can't spell how do you spell cinnamon twist? Cinnamon twist. There we go. That doesn't look like a cinnamon twist donut, but we're gonna run with it. And Joe says passion fruit. Oops. What am I doing? Double click. There we go. Passion fruit. And then we need one more. Let's see. Someone says honey donut. All right. Honey donut. Beautiful. All right, so we've got basically the overlay state created, and we're gonna dive into this component, and this is gonna be the default state. So both of these layers are gonna be 0% opacity. So just like this. And then we can create one more state at the top. This is gonna be a hover state. And then we're gonna dive into that component one more time, which I know I have to name. I'm gonna grab those two states again and set the opacity up to 100% or whatever we had before, just like that. Oh no, did I break the text? I broke the text, didn't I? I did break the text. What happened? Oh, I broke my text. That's okay. We're gonna run with it, and we're gonna pretend that didn't happen. 0%. We've got our component, we've got our repeat grid, and we press play. Again, we've got our area at the top, we've got our number counter that we can interact with, just like that. We've got our buy now button, which we can click on, and it says enjoy. We can also scroll down, and we can hover over top of these, and we've got our lovely overlays. And of course, I could jump in now that I've broken everything. I can jump in here to our hover states. I can rename this. What was this one again? I have no idea what I did. This is boop. No, what was the cinnamon twist? That's the one. Cinnamon twist. And we've got passion fruit. Even though this doesn't look like a passion fruit donut, we're gonna run with it. And the other one was, where was that other donut that I had? I don't remember. I'm gonna go with jelly. All right, let's try this one more time. We're gonna grab our component, go back to our default state, and now, there we go. Nope, I broke it again. They're all passion fruit now. Hey, anyway, you get the idea. I'll figure out what happened. Maybe I'll tweet about it later. But we're just about out of time. That went by really quickly. That's gonna be basically just about do it. Let me hop. And there I am. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining me on this another masterclass. Next week, no masterclass, but the XD team is going to be back in the hot seat. They're going to be talking about all sorts of things, maybe new features. I don't know. I mean, we only have 8 days left in January, so maybe they have something up their sleeves. Who knows? But thanks again, everyone, for joining me. Tim and Abdullah and Joe and Eric and Idris and who else do we have in here? Jack and Thomas and Kara and everyone else joining me. Hopefully I didn't make you too hungry. Hey, Ariana, thank you for joining me as well. And I will be back in, I think, 2 weeks. Another XD Masterclass. Definitely let me know. Probably not in the chat because I probably won't see it, but tweet it at me. Let me know on all sorts of platforms what you'd like to see me cover in a future Masterclass. Have all sorts of ideas, especially with possible new features coming up at some point in January. Again, only 8 days left. So thanks again, everyone, and I will see you all next time.